What is the scariest or creepiest theory you know about? I find number stations to be pretty creepy. Their purpose is technically a theory, as the groups that broadcast them won't officially confirm even their existence for the most part. Essentially, spying is still a very real thing for most world governments. One of the most foolproof ways of delivering a coded message is through a one-time code, a code used just once before being discarded. Your spy has the key, you have the message, and once the key is used it is discarded and the next message is sent using a different key. Additionally, shortwave radio is an extremely secure way of sending these messages. It sounds weird that a radio station anyone with a shortwave radio can listen to would be considered secure. But the beauty of the method is that shortwave radios are ubiquitous, cheap technology throughout most of the world. What looks more suspicious, a person traveling with a radio, or a person traveling with a sophisticated computer or satellite phone? While the signal can be received by anyone, it leaves no record of who received it and can't be intercepted and traced by a middleman. They don't care if you listen, because the stream of numbers is nothing without the code. And because you are using a one-time code, it can't be cracked as it's randomly generated and used once. The only time a one-time code has ever been broken was an instance where the code was reused. So your spy just tunes into the radio at a specific time on a specific day, writes down the numbers, decodes the message, discards the key, and no one is any the wiser. Most stations are identified by a call sign or little jingle, and these can range from kind of cute and cheerful to pretty eerie sounding. If you listen in frequently, you'll hear messages repeated over and over until one day they change up. It's believed they'll repeat the message until their spy can communicate they've received it. Essentially, if you have a shortwave radio, you can listen in on highly secret spy communications from countries all over the world. You can also listen in on countries jamming the communication, either by broadcasting state radio on the same signal, or trying to jam it with noise or static. You'd think the frequency of these transmissions would have gone down after the Cold War, but they're still going strong. The very first number stations appeared in the very early days of radio, during World War I. I find it fascinating, but also super creepy, that all of this secret communication is happening right out in the open, for us to tune into at any time, without any way of knowing who it is intended for or what is being transmitted. Telling this story makes me feel uncomfortable, even today, so I will tell it here. I don't know how much this story fits into this thread, but I've never had a platform that seemed appropriate to share it, so here we go. When I was 14 years ago, I moved from Iowa to Boulder, Colorado with my best friend Corey. We moved there during the month of August, and shortly thereafter I got a phone call from a number I didn't know. I answered it, and it turned out to be this girl that had attended the same high school as us, Ashley. Ashley had heard that Corey and I had just moved to Boulder, and she was calling because she, too, had just moved to Boulder to attend CU. She wanted to know if we wanted to get together sometime and hang out, party. Ashley was a couple years younger than us and we didn't run in the same crowds, so we didn't hang out much. But I remember her coming over to our apartment to smoke and chill once, then I remember asking her to get us weed. She did. She came with us to a party once, and I also remember us asking her for weed a second time, and her texting me back saying you guys just message me when you want weed, so no. After that I don't think we talked to her again. Fast forward 3 to 4 years, Corey and I are living back in Iowa. One night, I was out with a couple of people I'd gone to high school with, and we went to this dive bar called Thumbs. In the back of Thumbs there is a single pool table, which is where my group went because we had planned on playing. We got to the pool table, and there's Ashley, racking a set of pool balls. I was super surprised to see her there, so I walked right up to her and said something like, "Ashley, long time no see. What are you doing here? Did you move back from Boulder?" Ashley just stared at me for a second and then said, "What?" So I repeat myself and say, did you move back from Colorado? I haven't seen you since we hung out in Boulder. She looked truly confused, and then she said, what are you talking about? I never lived in Boulder. At this point I thought she was fucking with me because I specifically remembered hanging out with her more than once. So I laughed and was like, you're fucking with me, right? She shook her head no, and one of the girls I was with, who knew both of us, actually overheard it and butted in to confirm that Ashley had lived in our hometown the whole time. I completely dropped the subject to save face, but the experience was so unsettling that I made a beeline for the front door. I walked out onto the sidewalk, pulled my phone out of my pocket, and called Corey. I said, Corey, do you remember when we lived together in Boulder and Ashley came over and hung out with us? And Corey said, no man, that never happened. He was my best friend, so I knew he wasn't fucking with me, plus there was a 0% chance he and Ashley had ever talked to set something like this up. When I pressed the issue, he insisted that no one we had gone to high school with had ever moved out to Boulder, and that we certainly hadn't hung out with them. Since then, I've brought this up to Corey several times and his position has never changed. To this day, I don't know what happened. I specifically remember hanging out with her. She wore a tie-dye t-shirt when she came over the first time. And we hung out with her multiple times, I remember it so clearly. I still have those memories, but apparently they never happened. Even though the timeline matches exactly, she would have graduated high school that year and moved to Colorado in August for school. I know that the human memory is super unreliable, and I'm sure that's all this is, but that doesn't change that I am absolutely 100% fucking sure that this happened. 14 years later and I still stand by my story, wrong as it may be. Any type of human trafficking, poor young kids, vulnerable women trafficked for sex, kept in cages, in tiny apartments without beds or any amenities, many forcibly hooked on drugs to keep them compliant and dependent on their owners, forced into terrifying sexual encounters, barely fed or clothed. In places like Dubai there are tens of thousands of Asian manual laborers who are essentially slaves who have their passports removed, forced to live in severely overcrowded apartments, with upwards of 30+ men sharing a one-bedroom shoebox apartments, no access to medical care, not access to legal support, paid barely enough to feed themselves. Who went into Dubai on short-term contracts to provide for their families, but unable to get home, they then lapse the legal period of their visas and contracts, which means if they go to the police to try and leave back home, they face steep fines and jail time for overstaying, which serves as a deterrent to them reaching out for help. Any of those scenarios is purely awful and terrifying to me. The Vela Incident. September 1979, a U.S. Vela satellite detected a double flash of light over an area of the ocean between South Africa and Antarctica. The prior 41 double flashes observed by the satellite were from nuclear explosions, as this is what they were designed to observe. There also happened to be a typhoon happening in the area at the time, so it seemed like someone wanted to detonate it without being caught. Carter administration reported that it was a natural occurrence due to a small meteorite hitting the satellite. However, many other independent sources and even other countries have reported that they did indeed find traces of fallout and radiation. Because of the geopolitical climate of the times, there's very strong evidence that it was in fact a joint nuclear weapon test carried out by South Africa and Israel, and the US scrubbed the information regarding it because they didn't want to paint their allies in Israel in a bad light for working with apartheid-era South Africa. Strangely enough, Israel and South Africa have never denied having nuclear weapons programs, nor have they ever denied a joint test being responsible for the Vela incident. The Dark Forest Theory. This explains the Fermi paradox, why we haven't seen any other advanced life forms despite the vastness of the universe. Other advanced life forms don't send out signals into the rest of the universe because they're worried that something more advanced and dangerous is going to find them first. There's another idea that other civilizations know there's something out there but don't send any signals because it has no reason to not wipe out the entire planet. There's a science fiction book based on this, and I think this quote explains it better than I can. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is an armed hunter stalking through the trees like a ghost, gently pushing aside branches that block the path and trying to tread without sound. Even breathing is done with care. The hunter has to be careful, because everywhere in the forest are stealthy hunters like him. If he finds another life, another hunter, angel, or a demon, a delicate infant to tottering old man, a fairy or demigod, there's only one thing he can do: open fire and eliminate them. That humans almost went extinct. 70,000 years ago a volcano in Indonesia erupted. There's theories that we have a genetic bottleneck around that time. Took our population down to 10,000 to 3,000, like the size of one small town. Lots of fresh genetic material died with those who were lost, and the resulting inbreeding could have resulted in some genetic diseases that have made their way into humans today. Without this event, we may have advanced faster and be healthier people today. Much like the guy talking about the dude who disappeared after having been seen on airport cameras, whatever the fuck happened to Elisa Lam will probably always be a thought that pops into my mind. She was a Canadian student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. There's a bunch of footage of her acting hella fucking bizarre, like she was being followed. I believe the last bit of evidence of her alive was her repeatedly poking her head out of an elevator, going back in and hiding with her back next to the buttons on the elevator wall, repeatedly, before disappearing entirely. Her body was found in the hotel's water tank 20 days later, and she definitely would have been found any time soon, had the hotel residents not complained about the hotel water tasting funny. Just doesn't make sense to me. I feel bad for the poor girl, she was incredibly young. There was a call into Bell Radio in the late 90s by a frantic guy claiming to be an ex-Area 51 employee. He seemed worried, claiming he didn't have much time and that aliens were interdimensional beings infiltrating all manner of human civilization. Tool took the recorded audio and put it on one of their albums with some slight changes, including an added ambient audio track, and just made it all that much more creepy. There's about 30 seconds of missing audio in the original recording, and a bit of a while later the guy called back in claiming it was a hoax. When I was younger I had this little stuffed animal dog I named Rocky. One night, my younger sisters and I, who all slept in the same room so we could hang out together, were messing around, and I two-handed overhead tossed Rocky into the wall directly in front of my bed. He hit the wall, slid down behind whatever was in front of my bed, and was never seen again. I immediately went to go get him and he just wasn't anywhere. We tore the whole entire small room apart. We all saw the event occur. Over time the room has been completely emptied out, everything in it rearranged, walls painted, everything, and no Rocky. He just completely phased out of existence. Makes me think he glitched out of the system or something. I had a professor in college who taught physics, and he explained why we will likely never come across aliens. The universe is about 14 billion years old. Over the course of that time, it's likely that intelligent life, besides life on Earth, has existed. However, 14 billion years is an insanely long time. Other life forms have probably risen and fallen thousands of times over. Extreme dynasties with technology we can only dream of having have probably existed. Life forms could have lasted hundreds of thousands of years and still not even be close to our timeline. The chances of other intelligent life forms existing at the same time as humans, in the 14 billion years the universe has hosted a possibility for life, is really unlikely. Statistically, intelligent life to have formed, prospered, or even existed at the same time as humans is extremely small, simply due to the absolute drop in a bucket that we are on terms of time. We may very well be completely alone in the universe. Me and my dad seen this one guy come out the gas station, and he was bald and pale as shit with no hair at all. He was walking away from us as we were sitting in our truck eating. And I told my dad that he looked weird and resembled what people call the MIB. And that he might be a alien. I know it sounds dumb, but this guy just didn't look real. He looked so odd. When I said that to my dad, the guy quickly looked at me like he had heard me. He was like 20 feet away and we had our windows up. Right when he looked at me, I panicked and did the chin down nod that guys usually do, and he nodded back and turned away. And then drove around us once and did the index finger wave almost like he knew what I had said. But that shit had me thinking for quite some time. I still bet to my dad that he was alien or something, because with his weird demeanor and looks he fit the profile. The universe could be dying, and we'd have no way to know until we just suddenly vanish from existence. There could be a sort of quantum energy wave, can't remember what it's called because it's been so long since I read about it. 0-point collapse, maybe? Vacuum bubble burst. But whatever it is, it's an energy wave that starts at some point, and spreads outward at the speed of light, annihilating any matter, energy, and even spacetime in its path. Because the wave travels at the speed of light, it is invisible. We would have no way of seeing it coming, because any light emitted by it would hit us at the exact same time that the wave itself hits us. So, all of a sudden, the sun might just vanish from existence. We wouldn't notice because the sun's light from 8 minutes ago would still be reaching us. 8 minutes later, the earth just vanishes from existence. No warning. No trace. That all intelligent life kills itself. So the theory started out with the Fermi paradox. Basically, there are so many planets in this galaxy, let alone the entire universe, that it is statistically impossible that we're the only planet that developed intelligent life. So where is everybody? Well, the secondary theory is that every intelligent species reaches the point where they have a technology that can kill their entire species. And that the vast majority end up killing themselves at that point. Those who survive this time in their history are so rare that we haven't found them and they haven't found us. As a species, we reached that point in our history with the discovery of nuclear weapons, and we're at the height of risk during the Cold War, at least thus far in our collective history, but there are various technologies that could bring a species to this point in their history. This would mean that while so far we've survived, that it's statistically unlikely we will survive long term. That everything you're experiencing are nothing more than fleeting thoughts moments before your death. I have a very weird memory of going to the beach as a kid, when I was 7 or 8 years old. It was a normal beach day. My parents had bought me this terrible polystyrene surfboard, that didn't keep fatty me afloat but did give me a dreadful rash, for Christmas, summer. I was playing out in the surf when a huge wave crashed down on me. I have the memory of floating in the water feeling absolutely at peace. Which is the same sensation drowning people feel. My next memory is of packing up and heading home. I have very strong memories of me and my 2 brothers in the back seat. I was in the middle holding the big bottle of Coke still half full but warm. I spent the entire ride home shaking it up, then unscrewing the cap to watch it fizz up. After we got home and chilled it, the Coke was of course completely flat due to my car ride shenanigans. This led to a beating from my older brothers at having wasted the Coke, which was a rare treat for us. I have no recollection of getting out of the water or anyone rescuing me, and from my memories of after events obviously no one in my family had any concern. It is as if it never happened. Yet I remember it. Sometimes when falling asleep I have the same feeling and sensation I had when I drowned. I sometimes wonder if I'm still there, floating under the water near death from drowning in my entire life, since it's just my brain creating a life for me in the moments before I die. This would explain the feelings of déjà vu I have and how my intuition always proves to be correct, but I never act on it. I'm creating this life for myself. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.